Crown Jewel. That's this Saturday from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. It is happening during Riyadh season. If you ask me what that means, I don't necessarily know. If you ask me what Riyadh season was, if I wasn't a WWE fan, I would have no idea what you're talking about whatsoever. But I know because I watch WWE, and well, there isn't a place that they promote probably better when it comes to the actual venue and the actual city than Saudi Arabia when they go there, as WWE going to Saudi Arabia and these major events as part of a 10-year partnership. And this is year 6 of that 10-year partnership. It started in 2018 with the Greatest Royal Rumble. Thank God they never went back to that concept, and they've slowly but surely incorporated these events into being regular pay-per-view PLE events as part of the regular calendar, if you will. I mean, yes, they do get shoehorned in there a little way because we're going from an October pay-per-view and we still have Survivor Series. This is in between, but it doesn't feel like the Greatest Royal Rumble felt. Where one, they essentially ruined the Royal Rumble concept by making the Greatest Royal Rumble part of the Royal Rumble chronology that now exists in history, but also the fact that some of these pay-per-views existed within the structure of pay-per-views. For example, like the Greatest Royal Rumble, it happened 2 weeks after WrestleMania and 2 weeks before Backlash, so making it very hard to build those events when you only have a very short period of time in between. And as the Saudi Arabia partnership has grown, so has essentially not just the importance of the events and the logic of these events, but obviously the women's movement has definitely changed in these events much greater, right? The last event was King and Queen of the Ring back in May, and to think that we would have the Queen of the Ring as part of this event when this partnership started in 2018, it seemed like a million years away, and boom, it only took a few, and we went from no women's wrestlers, and in fact, I think one of the first WWE events that was there had an advertisement for women's wrestling in which sparked some controversy. Then later on, we got to women's wrestling, but obviously, you know, in the sense of much more covered up, much more traditional attire that they're not used to wearing, the talent-wise here in the United States and most of North America, to now they're an integral part of the show, right? And part of that is one of the major marquee events at this Crown Jewel. Now, this is the 6th event under the Crown Jewel banner. This is the 12th event in the Saudi Arabia WWE partnership. One thing about this arena exactly, it's hard to pin down how many times WWE's been to this arena. I know it's not their first time at the Mohammed Abdu Arena in Riyadh, because so far with the 2 places they seem to go in their Saudi Arabia pay-per-view events, it's Riyadh and it's Jeddah. And they've gone to a couple different places I've seen throughout. It's not a million different places, but it's not just the same one arena in Jeddah, not the same one arena in Riyadh. We've seen the Jeddah Superdome. We've seen this place. And I feel like there's some others that we've seen along the way, from places that are essentially just arenas to very big stadiums, right? We've seen the stadiums with the roof on them. We've seen the stadiums that are more open soccer-looking stadiums. So they've definitely mixed up the venues. But this is the 6th Crown Jewel that has existed, and it'll be the first one that incorporates this new kind of Survivor Series style match, right? And why I say that is because Survivor Series originally had the 5-on-5 tag matches, right? That was what it meant. That's why it exists, right? And over the years, Survivor Series has transformed into a couple different concepts of what they want to do with the event. And one thing that they did for many years, it turned it into a brand supremacy pay-per-view. Raw versus SmackDown, right? We had the champion of Raw versus the champion of SmackDown, or team of SmackDown versus team of Raw. And now we've come to Crown Jewel here, where they're doing kind of that concept with something on the line, right? I think 2021, I went to Survivor Series at Brooklyn in Barclays Center, and it was Big E, who was a champion at that time, versus Roman Reigns as a champion versus champion. And I think on that same card, we had Becky Lynch versus Charlotte Flair in another champion versus champion match. There wasn't a trophy to be had, though. And since then, we haven't had a match like that. And here at Crown Jewel, we're having that, right? There is the Crown Jewel championship. Now, this championship isn't going to be paraded around. This championship isn't going to be something that I think Cody or Gunther or Nia Jax or Liv Morgan are going to carry with them. It is essentially the same as those Survivor Series matches where it was champion versus champion, but at the end of the day, they'll have something to show off in front of the fans in Saudi Arabia and to those on TV. And then, we're not probably going to hear much about it again, right? It's not going to be a defended championship. It'll be something that apparently next year when Crown Jewel happens again, it'll be on the line again. So it's like a one-time trophy. So whoever wins this Crown Jewel championship will be able to take it home, will put it on their mantle and say they were the 2024 Crown Jewel champion, very similar to what we've seen recently in sports with the 2024 Los Angeles Dodgers being the World Series champions. They're the champions of all the baseball teams, right? They get to have this championship, they get to bring it home, and then next year it's a clean slate. You got to start again. And I imagine that's the same here with the Crown Jewel Championship. Like I said, a clean slate, and it'll be a new championship. I don't think whoever wins it this year will have to defend it next year for the sake of it's going to be a championship that is given to the winner of a match between the two champions at that time. Similar to what we saw in Survivor Series, right? Champion versus champion for supremacy, right? So this won't take us to any storylines going forward, but, it does still have importance, right? It still does have that importance because it's very similar to like sports, right? Let's think of a college football or college basketball perspective here in the United States, right? When you have the champion of one conference taking on the champion of another conference, or like, in the NFL, right? You have the AFC champion versus the NFC champion in the Super Bowl. And it's not just about being the champion and wanting to show that you're the best team, but it's also about showing that you're an equal, right? That your road to get to the Super Bowl or to that championship was an equal road as your opponent, right? That no conference is better than the other, and that, you're defending your conference, whether it's conference in football, conference in basketball, conference in college sports, right? You're defending your competition, right? The Dodgers in the World Series are defending the National League as a superior conference or league versus the American League by beating that team from the American League and saying, hey, if we were in your league, we would be in the same position, right? And that's very important in WWE, right? Because you have two world champions. You have a champion that represents Raw and a champion that represents SmackDown. And sometimes, like at WrestleMania, for example, one championship is kind of given that priority, right? It is no secret that what Cody Rhodes holds is looked at as the world champion in WWE. It's the belt that Roman Reigns held. It is the championship that main evented WrestleMania in 2024. It's the championship that main evented it in 2023, in 2022, in 2021, right? So there's all the consensus that Cody Rhodes is the champion of WWE. He left the main event of WrestleMania holding the championship that he defeated Roman Reigns with, and that's essentially the belt. Walter's belt was defended at the kickoff, right? The first match at WrestleMania, right? It's not really a championship that's been in any main events. Cody Rhodes' championships seem to have main evented more than Gunther's championship. So Gunther clearly would have a chip on his shoulder in a match like this in saying, he gets slighted. He is the world heavyweight champion, as they call it, right? But, he is definitely has to prove that he's the best. And I know that obviously he loves to show that he's the best and talk about how he's the best. And he understands that, really, he's got a legitimate gripe to being the best. Because he is, without a doubt, somebody who in the WWE has paid their dues and has taken care of business, everywhere he's been, whether it's been the NXT UK Championship and holding that for a record length of time, or holding the Intercontinental Championship for a record length of time, and now being the World Heavyweight Champion. So this isn't some guy who just picked up the belt last month and is one of the many who are kind of flipping hands with this belt. I think he is definitely a formidable foe and definitely has a legitimate argument to being the best in WWE and being slighted and being treated as the redheaded stepchild of WWE when it comes to their world champions. And he's got an argument, right? But there is no doubt when it comes to presentation that Cody Rhodes has been presented as the champion of WWE. based on his main event status, based on, where they place him on the card in the WrestleMania realm, right? And how Seth Rollins, right, kicked off WrestleMania when Cody Rhodes main evented WrestleMania, and how the importance of they put on Roman Reigns, versus this World Heavyweight Championship that was created during the Roman Reigns era, because Roman Reigns was essentially holding the main world title hostage and was so good, they created this belt to kind of be a secondary belt and to give people an opportunity who maybe failed along the way against Roman Reigns, such as a Seth Rollins. So, Gunther in this match has a lot to prove, and it's very interesting, and it will be interesting this Saturday in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, how they book this first ever Crown Jewel Championship match. Because, again, you want everyone to look strong. You don't want any world champion to be looked at as the second best world champion or the world champion junior. So how do you do that? How do you make it so that Cody Rhodes looks like the man that you've been presenting him to be, but that also Gunther looks like the man that you've been presenting him to be? So it's going to be interesting to see how this all transpires at Crown Jewel. And, there obviously is the rumors out there that a certain somebody who knows Saudi Arabia very well, because he's been paid a few extra dollars to make a few appearances at these Saudi Arabian pay-per-view events, and that is Goldberg. And is he going to have anything to say? And are we going to start a road to a Gunther versus Goldberg match after what we saw at Bad Blood in their little, back and forth segment that essentially Gunther talked about how he doesn't like Goldberg, and how, he's essentially second rate, right? But we'll see how that transpires, and if that essentially gets the ball rolling at Crown Jewel or maybe down the line. Because while this is the second to last pay-per-view of the year, it isn't the second to last pay-per-view before WrestleMania. And I think once Royal Rumble starts and January starts, we get the ball rolling towards WrestleMania. So I don't necessarily know where Gunther versus Goldberg is going to sit in the pantheon of the upcoming stories for WWE, if it's going to be a WrestleMania story or maybe something sooner. So depending on that is eventually how soon we get that ball rolling on getting that match. But the other match at Crown Jewel, that is for the Crown Jewel Championship, Nia Jax versus Liv Morgan. And I have to say, this one might be a little more intriguing because neither of these champions has been presented in the same way as the men, right? Nia Jax won the World Championship at SummerSlam after becoming Queen of the Ring, just like Gunther became King of the Ring and got his shot at SummerSlam to become champion, and did. But Nia Jax is the champion since SummerSlam, and Liv Morgan, she's been the champion a little bit longer than that, but a lot of people think that that might have happened a lot because of Rhea Ripley, right? Rhea Ripley left WrestleMania as the champion. She was looked at essentially as the main women's champion in WWE. She got hurt. Liv Morgan took advantage. It was at King and Queen of the Ring that Liv Morgan became the WWE World Women's Champion. So there isn't really anybody who is the flag bearer for women's wrestling in this match. They're two formidable world champions. They've done what they needed to do to become world champions. It's essentially only since this year, and essentially since May and more recent, that either of these women have become champions. So I'm looking forward to very much to see how WWE, plays this one out. And again, which woman they're going to put forth as the face of WWE, the Crown Jewel champion, the person who, when 2024 comes to an end, if they can only put one women's world champion on the cover of a program or on a banner, which one that will be. And essentially it'll be the winner of one of these people in this match. It's been announced recently that on a recent attack, Rhea Ripley has suffered some damage to her face, an orbital bone, if I could say that, and believe me, I'm surprised I said it even good the second time. But a lot of people say that is a chance for Rhea to take another break. The first break was a little unwarranted, a real legitimate injury, and people are wondering, obviously, if this injury the second time around is more or less to get her off television for a while, to maybe freshen things up with her heading into WrestleMania season. But one thing that's very surprising, but I guess not surprising at the same time, right? The Saudi Arabia pay-per-views, while they fit in to the chronological order of WWE pay-per-views, they're not glorified house shows. What happens on them now does have implications on the television programs going forward. But one thing, obviously, that is strange, I guess, from just a WWE fan as of late, is that it's a pay-per-view event with over 5 matches. The last time WWE had a pay-per-view event where there were more than 5 matches was SummerSlam. And the time before that was WrestleMania. So while Crown Jewel may not to WWE fans be looked at as the Rumble or Mania or SummerSlam, WWE looks at it as one of the tentpole events. And you got to kind of wonder from a WWE perspective if they even look at pay-per-view events anymore as like the Big 5, the Big 4. I know WrestleMania is treated very well, and Royal Rumbles and SummerSlam's obviously treated very well. I don't think that they think of those as lesser events, but I wonder if there are any events that WWE does look at like they might have in 20 years ago in the early 2000s as a B-show pay-per-view. And if so, and you were to compare Crown Jewel to Survivor Series, which has been a traditional staple pay-per-view, which event does WWE do you think that they hold to higher regard? I kind of wonder in that extent. This one's obviously probably going to be in front of a bigger crowd. 22,000, though, is the capacity of the stadium/arena where this is going to be held. But, you kind of wonder, is Crown Jewel essentially the new November major pay-per-view? Or is Survivor Series still that? Or is it looked at essentially like a B pay-per-view? And I kind of wonder, and I've always wondered, and I never really understood, going back to 2018 when this all started, how WWE essentially started presenting these Saudi Arabian pay-per-views and why. Because I'm fine with these pay-per-views. I've said this on this show for a long time. WWE is called World Wrestling Entertainment. I don't know why they go to London and Paris and France and England and all these other places, Spain and Germany and Japan and Australia, and they just bring them house shows. There's more than enough events to go around, right? A place like Buffalo, New York, or Des Moines, Iowa, doesn't need 2 televised WWE events a year when a place like London, England is getting none. Right? Or a place like Germany is getting none, or Paris is getting none. I never really understood that. I've always thought, why not have these pay-per-views in other countries, or Raws, or SmackDowns? You're going over there already. Why not, right? There would be a few occasions where a London or, a Paris or a Germany would host a Monday Night Raw, but it was few and far between, and I never really understood why. And with Saudi Arabia holding these pay-per-views, I never really understood when this thing started why they had to treat them as separatist events. Why they couldn't just incorporate them into the calendar. Why this had to be the greatest Royal Rumble. Why this had to be a pay-per-view in between pay-per-views. Why couldn't No Mercy or Elimination Chamber or Survivor Series just be from Saudi Arabia, right? We have enough events. We have these pay-per-views already in the existing calendar. Why can't we just replace it kind of how they're doing it now, right? The most recent time that WWE went to London was in 2023, right? They brought Money in the Bank there. Money in the Bank is an existing pay-per-view, so they took an existing pay-per-view and they brought it there. They took existing Backlash and they brought it to Puerto Rico, right? And they brought it to France. So I didn't really understand why they couldn't do the same here. Why Money in the Bank couldn't just be from Saudi Arabia, right? Why it had to be some non-existing pay-per-view. And we've seen it one time where Saudi Arabia did host Elimination Chamber, which is an existing pay-per-view. So, I never really understood why it had to be Super Showdown, or Crown Jewel, or Greatest Royal Rumble. Why couldn't it just be, hey, we're going to Saudi Arabia for Backlash, right? Backlash is on the calendar. We want to go to Saudi Arabia in April. Boom. Makes perfect sense, right? Didn't really understand that, but now they're incorporating it better, and it makes me wonder, is Crown Jewel essentially the new Survivor Series in a sense, right? We got it with this brand supremacy, world champion versus world champion match. But we're also getting it with 7 matches on the card. The first time, like I said, we haven't had a 5-match pay-per-view card since SummerSlam. So for you at home, what that means is the show on the East Coast in the United States starts at 1 o'clock. The pay-per-views recently have been ending around 4. I imagine this one's going to last maybe a little bit longer, right? And there's some matches on this card I'm surprised we're getting, because I would have thought maybe they'd be pushed down the line. And one specifically that I'm very surprised we're getting, but also not surprised because understanding the WWE tries to bring all the stars to Saudi Arabia when they go there. And that is a six-man tag match between Roman Reigns and the Usos versus the Bloodline 2.0, Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, and either Tonga Loa and or Jacob Fatu. Right? I don't know, but it's going to be a six-man tag from announcements. And how weird was that if you're a WWE fan, right? Because as of recording this, they haven't even announced this match. This match is going to be announced on the SmackDown the night before this show that was taped last week in Brooklyn. And I'm used to WWE double taping things in that sense, but it's weird in a way in this sense because one, Jimmy and Jey Uso showed up on Raw in Hershey this past week, so they had to really shuffle things in the chronological order of the story, right? If you want to tape two SmackDowns in a row, then everything goes in order as long as those competitors and superstars stay on SmackDown, right? But having them be live on SmackDown and then tape a SmackDown for the following week and then show up on Raw and do a storyline, it is weird because essentially they're showing up on Raw, but Raw is part 2 of this 3-part story that is SmackDown, Raw, SmackDown, despite the fact that part 3 has already been taped and shown in front of a live audience, right? So, it's weird because, it would be like in the sports sense of seeing a team have to talk about what they're going to do in the third quarter of an NFL game when they've already taped the first quarter. Makes sense. But they've already taped the fourth quarter as well. So fans have already seen the fourth quarter and know how this ends in the sense of they make this match. But at the same time, they have to kind of act like it's the middle act of this 3-part act here. And, I guess that's kind of awkward. I would personally, if I was going to do something like this, there's a few different ways I would take it. One, I would, if I was double taping a SmackDown, I would probably have not had Jimmy and Jey Uso on Raw. I would have them solely just stay on SmackDown, so things stay, like I said, in chronological order, so that everybody, whether you were in attendance or you watched it on TV, didn't see anybody who already recorded stuff prior, right? During COVID, that's fine because there was no live attendance. So they were recording the main event of WrestleMania before they were recording the Go Home show to hype up WrestleMania, right? Drew McIntyre's coming out on Raw with the World Heavyweight Championship talking, or, Brock Lesnar might be coming out on Raw with the World Heavyweight Championship during COVID and talking about how he's going to defend it this Sunday at WrestleMania despite the fact that he already recorded the match in which he lost. So there's that strangeness, but this isn't COVID, right? There's real people who've seen this stuff. It's been, visibly seen on people's cell phones and in a live audience. So makes it weird in that sense. So just keep Jimmy and Jey on SmackDown. But also, too, the fact that, you're making a match for the pay-per-view, which, for the most part, should probably be made and put out to the general public in advance. And WWE has done that now on their social media channels, announced that this match is taking place because we already know it's taking place. And frankly, when it comes to pay-per-views, I know nobody's really paying per view to watch this. You want to have the matches hyped up a little bit in advance so you know what you're getting, whether it's to the live audience in Saudi Arabia, to the people who are watching on television and expecting certain matches, or, like me, who, right, is previewing this pay-per-view, right? You want to have that kind of prepared ahead of time, so I can understand why they put it out on social media. Probably just should have booked it and made it official on the last live SmackDown, and not had that essentially revealed on the Go Home SmackDown. Because it is kind of weird to make a match for a pay-per-view 24 hours or less than that before the pay-per-view, especially when all logical people and all smart people know that all the competitors are already in Saudi Arabia. So this match has clearly been in the works for longer than they've made it known to the public. But it's interesting that they're having this match in general because, right, Survivor Series, that's where this road has been leading since as long as I can remember, right? When Survivor Series War Games was announced, which even before it was announced because we knew it was going to happen down the calendar somewhere, right? We thought this was going to happen, right? The Bloodline Civil War again, right? Point 2, 2.0, Part 2, the return. Whatever you have it, right? We knew this was where it was leading. Survivor Series, War Games, the new Bloodline versus the old Bloodline, right? And I can all but assume that's what we're still going to get in a 4-on-4 capacity. But at Crown Jewel, we're getting it in a 3-on-3 capacity. So I don't know if that necessarily, what that means when it comes to where Sami Zayn will fit in this. I imagine Sami Zayn, they've already started to tease a little bit where Sami Zayn will be a part of this, right? Because they showed on Raw. Jimmy and Jey Uso overhearing Sami Zayn talking to Solo Sikoa. So I think this is just kind of a filler tag team match of a 6-on-6. And they don't want to give us the 4-on-4 yet because we're going to get the 4-on-4 at War Games. And it's going to be Bloodline Civil War again. So I'm just surprised we're getting this in any capacity. But also not surprised, like I said, because I know that when it comes to Saudi Arabia, they pull out all the stops. Right? One match I'm very surprised we're getting. One, because, talking about the history of Saudi Arabia pay-per-views and where that was with the women's revolution and the women's matches not taking place on the cards at all or, being mentioned, to having a pay-per-view match with a lot of women in it that, to be fair, I don't see a lot of people having a real demand for. Meaning if this wasn't on this, if this was the main event of this week's SmackDown instead, I don't know a lot of backlash, or pushback you'd get from it from fans. So they're really going out of their way to feature 8 women in a tag team match on a card that many people already think, might be a little overstuffed as it is because we're used to these 5-match pay-per-views. We've been okay with these 5-match pay-per-views. So looking at this card as a 6-match pay-per-view, not counting the women's tag, and being okay with that, nobody was saying, this card should have a 7th match. And the 7th match should be this. But we're getting it, right? It's happening. It's a fatal 4-way tag team match for the Women's Championship. And I don't necessarily know if that means it's elimination style, because fatal 4-way makes me think of WrestleMania 2000, the fatal 4-way elimination match for the World Heavyweight Championship. Triple H, Big Show, Rock, Mankind, right? So I don't necessarily know if this means elimination style or that's just fun word. I'm imagining it just means first pinfall wins, but it's Jade Cargill and Bianca Belair, the current champions, against Damage Control, Kairi Sane, and Io Sky versus Meta-4, which, to be 100% with you, I'm getting new to these guys, right? They're new to the main roster, Lash Legend and Jakara Jackson. They're newer to the main roster, right? I haven't had a ton of expertise with them in that sense of they're a tag team, so they're not really getting featured solely on their own. It's a little bit different when you come up as a solo competitor because you are a solo competitor and you're getting promoted as such, and you have to be learned and taught to the to the fans and to the audience as a single being, right? So as a tag team with multiple people, you have to sometimes figure out who's who, right from the get-go, right? So Lash Legend, Jakara Jackson, it's not hard to figure out who's who, right? I think they even have their names on their tights, but it's just when you're introduced to 2 people and they're brought into the tag team division, which, let's be real, right? The tag team division isn't where we figure Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes and The Rock and Stone Cold and Triple H are best known in our lives, right? That's not where we know The Undertaker best for, right? That's where we know the Dudley Boys for, which is fine. The Dudley Boys are great. The Hardy Boys are great. Edge and Christian are great, right? But that's not where we think is going to main event of WrestleMania. That's not who we think the face of the company is. So when you come in as a tag team competitor, you already have that kind of, you're not getting pushed to the main event because, a match like this isn't going to be your main event pretty much on any card, right? So we're getting used to Meta-4 here, but also Chelsea Green and Piper Niven are part of this event. Chelsea Green and Piper Niven, they showed up recently on NXT. Kind of doing that whole thing where, hey, don't forget about us, and showing up on NXT to kind of get that added publicity, that added exposure that there might not be getting on Raw and SmackDown. Because again, right, Piper Niven, the last time I saw her going for a world championship, she was Doudrop going against Becky Lynch at the Royal Rumble in 2022, which is almost 3 years ago now, crazy to think. So, we don't necessarily look at all of them as main eventers. So good for them to go to NXT and kind of get some more of that added exposure. But in this match, I can't see Jade Cargill and Bianca Belair not defending, right? We've been talking about their eventual breakup and going on each other one-on-one. Hasn't happened yet. And when we finally actually saw them lose the championships a few months ago, they found a way to get them back. So I don't know where the end of this tag team run is coming with them, but I imagine somewhere down the line, right, they're going to have to get back into the solo swing of things, especially Jade Cargill, who we really haven't seen in the solo swing of things in WWE since she's been here, which is very surprising because she's brought in as essentially this character, which I think is going to, by the end of 2024, be your world champion and be unstoppable, be the China of this company, right? Be treated in this company similar to how she was treated in AEW, but that's not what we've seen, right? We've seen her booked up and pretty much handcuffed in this tag team world, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but a much different, presentation, right? Because she is, for all intents and purposes, the strongest woman in the WWE, the most intimidating woman in the WWE. So I can't wait to see her go on her own. I don't think it's going to happen after this pay-per-view, right? I think the tag team champions here are defending, but if I was to say who's going to win, if it's not them, I might have to go with Metaphor, similar to what I was talking about building this match up, and that is, hey, no better way to get your name out there than being the tag team champions. Another championship match on this card. We saw, a best of 7 series kind of turn into what is now a triple threat, right? The best of 7 had an inconclusive finish. So now we get Andrade and Carmelo Hayes versus LA Knight for the WWE United States Championship in a triple threat. LA Knight, I think, we got to get him. It's been too long. He's got to get into this world title picture. We saw him on this stage last year, right? In this world title picture. He lost to Roman Reigns, but we saw him in this spot, right? And in 2023, when I was at Money in the Bank in London and around all the UK, there was no one hotter. Everyone thought LA Knight was winning that Money in the Bank, and everyone thought it was a matter of time before he won it and became essentially a world champion. And almost 2 years later, about a year and a half later, he's still middling around the same parts of the roster and the same championship belts he was back then. And I think, this match, I think it's time for Carmelo Hayes to win this United States Championship, his first belt on the main roster, and then LA Knight, I want to see him a legitimate part of the upper echelon, because not just that he deserves it, but in order to keep LA Knight fresh and in order to keep him the most over guy on this roster as he was in 2023, you got to put him there. So I'm hoping that's what they indeed do. I'm hoping to see him lose the championship to Carmelo Hayes, and this is a good way to get it off him without him even taking the pin, right? And let's shoot him to where we thought he should have been 2 years ago. Randy Orton, Kevin Owens, one-on-one. Triple H is a special guest referee. A lot of people are wondering here, similar to how we saw Triple H and Shawn Michaels essentially wrestle in Saudi Arabia in the years past with The Undertaker and Kane. Is Triple H really done? Is he really done when it comes to an in-ring competitor? Or is something going to happen here where we see him again? Where essentially, like I said, with the Saudi Arabia stuff, we didn't think we were going to see Shawn Michaels in a match ever again, or Goldberg, or The Undertaker. But hey, they all came out of retirement, and Weird and all showed up here to wrestle in previous Saudi Arabia pay-per-views. And I'm not saying Triple H wrestles on this card, but is this the card that essentially gets him out of retirement to essentially get involved in some sort of in-ring action again? Because he's a special referee here. Randy Orton, Kevin Owens. I feel like this match could go either way, and I wonder where Triple H is going to side here when it comes to making the decision. I'm very curious to see. I see Kevin Owens winning this, and Triple H making the pinfall, telling Randy Orton, you know what I mean? He's out here saving him from Kevin Owens, and let's see if he indeed does that on Saturday at Crown Jewel. A match that was a few months, if you will, in the making, and that's Randy Orton Seth frickin' Rollins versus Bronson Reed. We saw Bronson Reed essentially making quite the name for himself on the main roster on Raw, just tearing the roster apart and just all those tsunamis he gave Seth frickin' Rollins off the top rope and through the table, putting him out of action to the point that he came back, and here he is taking on Bronson Reed, where we'd expect him, not necessarily the pay-per-view itself, but the PLE was expected for these two to square off against each other. And here we go, Bronson Reed, Seth frickin' Rollins. It's going to be very interesting if Bronson Reed can keep up his intimidating presence and all the nonsense he's been doing with the break in the ring with Braun Strowman and putting Seth frickin' Rollins out of commission. Does Seth Rollins get his revenge and essentially really just deflate the balloon of Bronson Reed's push? Or does Bronson Reed continue to show his dominance, and maybe even in a quick fashion? Should be a good match in the sense of where we go forward from here. I'm hoping Bronson Reed gets the win. I'm hoping we continue his push. Seth Rollins can suffer a loss, especially too if he's not 100% and coming off of being injured at the hands of Seth frickin' Rollins. But I think Bronson Reed, right, like I said with LA Knight, let's continue the push. LA Knight, we're going to give him the push in a loss because he's going to lose the United States belt and move forward. But Bronson Reed, he's going to get the push with a win, hopefully, here. And I'm very interested to see what happens. Crown Jewel, it's a big pay-per-view event, and good on WWE here in the sense of taping Raw in Riyadh on Sunday after Crown Jewel. Now, it's probably going to get spoiled. It's probably going to get leaked out what happens, for Monday Night Raw this upcoming week because it is going to be pre-taped. I guess it's good because it's happening from Saudi Arabia, so less North American social media eyes are going to leak out what happened. But hey, you know what I mean? They're already over there. Give them, this other event. I liked it last time around when they gave them SmackDown, right? It makes sense, right? It makes probably perfect sense in this regard because this time around we got a double taping, which kind of screwed up in the chronological order of storylines. But listen, you're going over there. You're making a big deal out of this. You're making a big event out of Crown Jewel or King and Queen of the Ring. Give them SmackDown. Give them Raw. Just makes sense. Do that with all these major events, if you ask me personally, right? You maybe don't have to do it with Bad Blood, but do it with Royal Rumble. Do it with Survivor Series. And frankly, as of right now, I don't know where SmackDown is the night before Survivor Series. I'm wondering if a double taping is in order due to the American Thanksgiving holiday and wanting to keep, talent happy. This isn't the Vince McMahon regime anymore. So wondering if maybe talent will get that full week off right after you tape Monday Night Raw. They'll have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off before they have to go to Vancouver for Survivor Series. So only time will tell on that. But, good on WWE for having Raw in Riyadh afterwards, right? You're not rushing these guys home on jet lag, or doing something crazy. You're letting them perform in Riyadh, put on a television show while you're there. And one thing I'm a little bit jealous of, and I have to say when it comes to these Saudi Arabia events, and this is what I want here, right? Saudi Arabia, we all know, right? Spending a lot of money as part of this 10-year partnership of Saudi Vision 2030. But one thing I've noticed when WWE goes to Saudi Arabia, so it shows they can indeed give a presentation in this way. And that is one, fireworks. Real fireworks. Good fireworks. Lots of fireworks. We've seen WWE as of late, even including SummerSlam and WrestleMania, really laying off the pyro, limiting the pyro, right? And even at places like WrestleMania and SummerSlam, despite the fact that they're stadiums, despite the fact that some of the video packages and montages the WWE does to promote their event showcase fireworks being shot off over stadiums in previous years, they've been laying off on that in North America, right? But in Saudi Arabia, they have not. We've seen fireworks over stadiums. We've seen essentially the presentation of a WrestleMania. And part of that also presentation, on top of Riyadh, we all know having that WWE experience where they have that kind of year-round WWE World Access kind of place where they have exhibits and fan stuff to look at and to see. But seeing kind of the arena that this event's going to take place in Saudi Arabia, it is all bannered up. No, it is not just, on the marquee that is rotating with the other events that come through town of WWE will be here on Saturday next. We're talking light poles blanketed and wallpapered with WWE. We're talking, just pillars and other things around the community. One thing that I thought was awesome, and I thought probably the best in the last few years, probably even better than Philadelphia WrestleMania, if you ask me. And that is SummerSlam in Detroit 2023, right? They had a huge, when I'm talking huge, talking 20-story tall banner for SummerSlam in downtown Detroit for all to see, for those to know whether you're a WWE fan or not, that this is a big event. Because if you live in Detroit and you're not a wrestling fan, you hear WWE's coming to town, you have to say, great. So's Madonna, so's, Jason Aldean, so's Taylor Swift, so's every major event, right? I know as a non-WWE fan, the SummerSlam, is just one of those. And the Super Bowl, and Taylor Swift maybe even, and the Final Four in college basketball. Those are the big events. Those are the events that we should be really proud that come to our town that are going to bring tourists from all over the world, right? Everybody knows the Super Bowl is going to be a big deal, even if you don't watch football. But SummerSlam, I mean, yeah, SummerSlam's coming to Ford Field. I don't even know why you're telling me that on the news, right? Because that's just another event that's happening at Ford Field like any other, right? So as a non-WWE fan, what do I care, or what do I know when it comes to how important that event is to our community? But WWE did a good job in promoting how important that event was with these huge, huge banners, right? That you don't just get from every touring act that comes through, right? And on top of that, the metro system and their subway system had SummerSlam, and all the decals all over the public transit lines. So as the public train is coming through the city for probably a week or two in advance, you see SummerSlam and all the WWE, superstars wallpapered along them. So again, if you're not a WWE fan, it's kind of in your face that this is a major event coming to your town, right? And you're going to know about it, and you're going to hear about it, and you're going to talk about it at dinner that night. And you're going to say, oh, I know WWE is coming to town on Saturday. Maybe we should avoid the downtown area. I guess it's going to be pretty big. And you're like, oh, yeah, I've seen that too. I think it's August 3rd, right? I saw the billboard. I saw the banner. I know WWE comes to town a lot, but according to this promotion, it seems like this is a major event. And then lastly, the outside of Ford Field itself, right? This wasn't just a video board that was put up for the day that everybody can see that's going to the event and then switched off as soon as you leave. This was, again, vinyl wrapped decals all over Ford Field that made it so that if the Detroit Tigers players were walking to the baseball stadium, for their game that day, or maybe fans were walking to a Detroit Tigers game that day, leading up to SummerSlam, they knew that that was a major event because, again, it was in their face. And so far what I've seen with WWE, they do the same in Saudi Arabia. There's all sorts of Crown Jewel banners. There's all sorts of Crown Jewels billboard. So I just want to see more of that here, right? WrestleMania, I don't want it to just be, something that is on the side of the stadium, right? We know with Las Vegas this upcoming year that they have, a big a video screen on the side of Allegiant Stadium. And I imagine it'll say WrestleMania, right? But it'll say WrestleMania, and it'll probably flip and flicker between other events at Allegiant Stadium, essentially putting no more importance on WrestleMania. Then again, Garth Brooks coming also. And don't forget the National Rodeo Finals is coming here. And UNLV football's here. So just putting it essentially within that. So I think WWE does a good job when it comes to going to places like Saudi Arabia to really promote it to the whole area, make everyone know it's a big deal, make everyone know it's a huge event. I'd love to see more of that here. And I can't wait to watch Crown Jewel this upcoming week and see who will be crowned this Crown Jewel champion. And I wonder if it'll be just like the Shane McMahon trophy from Saudi Arabia a couple years ago, or the world's greatest Royal Rumble belt that Braun Strowman got for winning that, and essentially being a championship that is presented on television, that is shown to the world, and then forgotten about and never talked about again.